The glass tower of Reynolds Enterprises gleamed under Boston's autumn sky, a monument to ambition where Ethan Hayes pushed his maintenance cart through silent corridors long after the power suits had left for the night. Once a financial analyst with a corner office and a rising star swagger, Ethan now wore a faded janitor's uniform, its frayed cuffs a quiet testament to the life he'd lost 3 years ago when he refused to falsify a deal and watched his world unravel, his wife's death from cancer, his career blacklisted, and his savings drained by medical bills for his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, whose asthma tethered them to a precarious existence. At 38, he moved invisibly through the executive floor, emptying trash bins with the kind of practiced quiet that kept him unnoticed. But tonight the silence felt heavier, charged with the weight of a city buzzing about Reynolds Enterprises' impending $5 billion merger with Innovatech. Ethan's calloused hands paused outside the executive suite, where a single light burned, casting the silhouette of Sophia Reynolds, the 32-year-old CEO who'd inherited her father's empire and a reputation for ruthless brilliance. He'd heard the breakroom whispers about her, how she'd tripled the company's value in 4 years, how her sharp mind and sharper tongue left board members scrambling. But he kept his head down, knowing invisibility was safer than curiosity. Yet something about her solitary figure, hunched over papers with the same focus Lily had when puzzling over math homework, stirred a pang in his chest, a reminder of the daughter waiting at their neighbor's cramped apartment, her inhaler always close by. Ethan checked his watch 9:15 p.m. and pushed his cart forward, intending to skip the room when a cascade of papers hit the floor inside, followed by Sophia's frustrated exhale. Instinct from his old life kicked in, and he knocked softly, his voice steady but deferential, asking if she'd prefer he return later. Her head snapped up, green eyes sharp with surprise, as if she'd forgotten anyone else existed in the building. And with a curt wave she let him in, her voice edged, with the strain of someone wrestling with a decision too big for one night. As Ethan swept up the scattered papers, his eyes caught a memo-highlighted columns detailing post-merger workforce optimization, a cold phrase for slashing thousands of jobs, including every maintenance worker in the Boston office, his department. Code circled in red. His breath hitched, the numbers searing into his mind. 4,800 jobs gone. Sophia reached for the papers, her expression tightening as she noticed his gaze linger, and for a moment their eyes locked hers guarded, his carefully blank, a mask he'd perfected since his fall. "That's confidential," she said, her tone a warning, and Ethan nodded, handing over the memo with a murmured apology, his heart pounding as he left the room, the weight of what he'd seen settling like a stone. By the time he finished his shift and picked up Lily, her small hand clutching his as they walked home through the chilly night, Ethan knew he couldn't stay silent, not for himself, not for the others facing the same axe, and not for the part of him that still believed one voice could matter. The merger signing was tomorrow, and with it, a chance to speak a truth that might cost him everything. But as he tucked Lily into bed, her soft breathing a reminder of why he fought, Ethan resolved to step out of the shadows, for her and for the man he used to be. The boardroom of Reynolds Enterprises buzzed with anticipation, a sea of tailored suits and camera flashes spilling through the glass walls as Boston's elite gathered for the $5 billion Innovatech merger signing. But Ethan Hayes, in his starched maintenance uniform, felt the air thicken with the weight of his decision as he slipped through the service entrance, unnoticed as always. His heart thumped louder than the reporters' chatter outside. Ethan had spent the night poring over old financial journals, dusting off skills from his analyst days, confirming the merger's projections were built on shaky valuations and hidden kickbacks, knowledge that burned in his pocket alongside a printed employee roster, each name tied to a family, a mortgage, a life. Security was tight, but his familiar face and ID badge let him glide past. The invisibility he'd once resented now his greatest asset as he positioned himself near the water cooler, watching Sophia Reynolds at the head of the table. Board members exchanged self-congratulatory smiles, and Michael Grant, the CFO with slick-back hair and a predatory grin, hovered close, his eyes darting as if sensing a storm. Ethan's pulse raced 5 minutes until the signatures sealed the deal. 5 minutes to act or lose everything. But Sophia's brief hesitation, a flicker of doubt as she glanced at Michael, gave him the courage to step forward, his voice cutting through the room's hum, clear and unyielding. "Don't sign that deal." The room froze, gasps rippling as heads turned to the janitor daring to interrupt a billion-dollar moment. Cameras swiveling outside, and Sophia's green eyes locked onto his, sharp with shock but searching, as if recognizing something beyond. His uniform. Security moved toward him, their hands on his arms, but Sophia raised a palm, her voice a blade. Everyone out, except him. The boardroom emptied in a stunned shuffle, leaving Ethan and Sophia alone, the unsigned contract a silent. Third presence on the table, security looming just beyond the glass. "You have 1 minute to explain why I shouldn't have you arrested," she said, her tone low but laced with curiosity, her posture rigid yet open, as if daring him to justify the chaos. Ethan placed the employee roster on the table, his hand steady, despite the adrenaline, and met her gaze. "Because you know this deal's wrong. I saw you hesitate. And I saw the memo last night, the one showing 4,800 people losing everything while executives pocket bonuses." Her eyes narrowed, calculating, but he pressed on, voice softening with urgency. "I used to analyze mergers like this at Morgan Stanley, until I lost it all calling out a deal just like this one overvalued assets, hidden layoffs, all to line. The pockets of men like Michael Grant." Sophia's expression flickered, a crack in her CEO armor, and she reached for the roster, scanning names and numbers, parents, veterans, single mothers, her fingers tightening on the paper. "How does a janitor get access to confidential memos?" she asked, suspicion warring with intrigue. And Ethan admitted to seeing the papers fall, his old instincts kicking in to read what could destroy his daughter's future. He pointed to the roster. "These aren't just numbers. They're people, like me, scraping by, and this deal will gut them while Innovatech's empty R&D pipeline collapses your company in 3 years." The air grew taut, Sophia's silence a battleground between her loyalty to her father's legacy and the truth in Ethan's words, her eyes darting to the contract, then back to him. "The board's approved this," she said, almost to herself. But Ethan leaned forward. "They're betting on you not asking questions. But you already are, or you wouldn't have stopped security." A tense beat passed, her jaw tightening as she pressed the intercom, her voice crisp. "Postpone the signing for 24 hours. Technical issue, no questions." Turning back to Ethan, she slid a card across the table with an address scrawled on it. "My place, 8 o'clock tonight. Bring your evidence. If you're wrong, you'll regret this." Security escorted him out, their grips firm but unnecessary. As Ethan's legs carried him to the service exit, the weight of his gamble settling in his job was likely gone, Lily's stability hanging by a thread. But for the first time in years, he felt alive, driven by a purpose bigger than survival. On the bus ride home, he clutched the roster, thinking of Lily's smile, and called their neighbor, Mrs. Carter, to check on her, his voice steady despite the storm ahead, knowing tonight's meeting with Sophia could change everything or end it. Sophia Reynolds' penthouse loomed atop a sleek Boston high-rise, its floor-to-ceiling windows casting a cold glow over the city as Ethan Hayes stepped off the elevator, his worn laptop bag slung over his shoulder, clutching the evidence that could either save or doom his fragile world with Lily. The space was stark, all sharp lines and minimalist furniture, a sterile contrast to his cluttered apartment where every corner held traces of his daughter's life crayon drawings, asthma, inhalers, secondhand books stacked precariously. Sophia stood by the dining table, the weight of their earlier confrontation lingering in the air. Without preamble, Ethan launched into his analysis, spreadsheets flickering across the screen, revealing Innovatech's inflated valuations, buried liabilities, and a shell of an R&D department data he'd pieced together from discarded reports and his own relentless calculations. Skills honed in a past life, now resurrected for this moment. Sophia leaned in, her sharp mind dissecting every figure, challenging his assumptions with questions that cut like scalpels. Yet her tone carried a flicker of respect, as if seeing him not as a janitor, but as the analyst he'd once been. Their debate stretched into hours, the city lights outside a silent witness to their unlikely partnership. Ethan's voice steady as he explained how Michael Grant's projections hit a 35% overvaluation, designed to enrich executives while leaving workers like him jobless. A call from Mrs. Carter shattered the intensity. Lily's asthma had flared, her breathing labored, and Ethan's heart lurched, his hands fumbling to pack his bag as he apologized, already halfway to the door. Sophia's expression shifted, the CEO mask slipping to reveal something human, and she grabbed her keys. "I'm driving you." The ride to Ethan's neighborhood was quiet, her luxury SUV gliding through streets lined with cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights, a world away from her penthouse, and Ethan felt the familiar sting of shame as they pulled up to his building. Its peeling paint and propped-open security door, a raw reminder of his fall. Inside, Mrs. Carter's worried face greeted them, and Ethan rushed to Lily, finding her curled on the couch, her small frame trembling with each shallow breath, her inhaler clutched tightly. Sophia, out of place in her designer coat, knelt beside them, her calm voice cutting through the panic. "We need to get her to a hospital." At Massachusetts General, Sophia's quiet authority moved mountains. Nurses ushered them to a private room. Doctors appeared swiftly, and Ethan held Lily's hand as they adjusted her treatment, her eyes fluttering with trust that broke his heart. Sophia stayed, making calls in the corner, ensuring costs were covered, and when Ethan tried to protest, she waved him off, her gaze softening as she watched Lily stabilize. In a rare moment of stillness, she asked, "How long has she been sick?" And Ethan admitted the truth he rarely spoke. Sophia listened, her silence heavy with understanding, and shared a glimpse of her own isolation nights alone in that empty penthouse, her father's legacy a gilded cage that left no room for anything but ambition. As dawn crept through the hospital windows, Ethan saw her differently, not the untouchable CEO, but a woman grappling with the cost of her choices, just as he was. Their shared vigil over Lily forged a fragile trust, a bridge between their worlds. And when Lily stirred, smiling weakly at Sophia, something unspoken passed between them, a promise that this night had changed more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. Sophia drove them home, the early light casting long shadows, and as Ethan carried a sleepy Lily to their apartment, Sophia lingered at the door, her voice quiet. "Bring your analysis to the office tomorrow. We're not done." Ethan nodded, gratitude and resolve mingling, knowing this alliance with Sophia could cost them both everything, yet feeling, for the first time in years, that he wasn't fighting alone. The hospital's sterile hum faded behind them, but the warmth of Lily's hand, in his and Sophia's unexpected kindness, carried him forward, a spark of hope in the storm still to come. Ethan Hayes sat at his small kitchen table, the early afternoon light filtering through a cracked window, illuminating the pile of unpaid bills and Lily's latest drawing, a bright sun over a stick-figure family that now included a third figure, with auburn hair, a quiet nod to Sophia Reynolds' unexpected place in their lives. The hospital visit had left Lily stable but fragile, her asthma flare-up a reminder of how thin the thread of their survival was. And Ethan's mind churned with the risk he'd taken by confronting Sophia about the Innovatech merger, his job. Now a question mark and the weight of 4,800 other families pressing on his conscience. He barely slept, his old laptop humming through the night as he refined his analysis, cross-referencing Innovatech's public filings with the memo he'd seen, uncovering a trail of deliberate misrepresentations, offshore accounts, inflated patents, and a board complicit in the deception, led by Michael Grant's quiet hand. Ethan's resolve hardened, but fear gnawed at him as he kissed Lily's forehead, leaving her with Mrs. Carter to rest, and headed to Reynolds Enterprises. The employee roster and his data tucked in his bag like a ticking bomb. Sophia had texted him to meet her in a discreet conference room, away from the boardroom's glass walls and prying eyes. But as he stepped off the service elevator, a security guard's stern voice stopped him. Michael Grant had flagged his ID, accusing him of accessing restricted files, and within minutes, Ethan found himself in a sterile HR office. 2 police officers at the door, their badges gleaming under fluorescent lights. Corporate espionage, the HR manager said, sliding a police report across the desk. Michael's signature bold at the bottom, claiming Ethan had stolen proprietary data to sabotage the merger. Ethan's stomach dropped, his mind flashing to Lily's terrified face if he didn't come home tonight. The memory of her clinging to him during the hospital visit, now a knife in his chest. He answered their questions calmly, denying nothing but refusing to elaborate without a lawyer, his voice steady even as his hands shook beneath the table. Knowing Michael's move was retaliation for his boardroom interruption, a power play, to silence him and protect the deal's hidden profits. Hours crawled by in a holding cell, the clang of metal doors echoing as Ethan sat on a hard bench, his thoughts spiraling. How would Lily cope if he were charged? How could he have been so reckless to think one voice could challenge a machine like Reynolds Enterprises? The door swung open, and to his shock, Sophia strode in, her presence commanding even in the dim police station, followed by a silver-haired man in a crisp suit, his briefcase radiating authority. "This is David Ellison, your lawyer," she said. Her voice clipped but her eyes fierce with determination. "You're out on bail, which I've covered." Ethan stared, disbelief warring with a flicker of hope, as Ellison outlined the charges: data theft, breach of confidentiality, but assured him they were flimsy, built on Michael's fabricated narrative. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan asked, as they walked to her waiting car, the city's dusk wrapping them in shadow. Sophia's jaw tightened. "Because Michael lied to me, and I don't tolerate betrayal." She revealed she'd ordered an independent audit after their penthouse meeting, and the results, delivered that morning, confirmed Ethan's findings. Innovatech was a house of cards, its value propped up by falsified reports, with Michael and board chairman Robert Klein pocketing kickbacks to push the deal through. Sophia's voice softened as she admitted, "I've spent years building walls to survive this world, but seeing Lily last night, your fight for her, it reminded me there's more at stake than stock prices." They drove to her penthouse, where Lily waited with Sophia's assistant, a kind woman who'd set her up with puzzles and hot cocoa, and Ethan's heart swelled as Lily ran to him, her small arms tight around his neck, her relief a balm to the day's chaos. Over Lily's head, Sophia's gaze met his, a silent acknowledgement of the battle they now shared, and she outlined the storm ahead. The board was convening an emergency meeting tomorrow to force the merger or oust her as CEO. Painting Ethan as a disgruntled ex-analyst with a vendetta, his Morgan Stanley termination already leaked to the press. "They're coming for us both," she said, her hands gripping the steering wheel. And Ethan saw the cost of her defiance, her father's legacy, her identity as the untouchable CEO, all on the line. He asked, "Why risk it? You could sign the deal. Keep your throne." Sophia's laugh was brittle, her eyes distant. Because I'm tired of winning at the cost of everything else. I want to know who I am when I'm not just my father's daughter. At the penthouse, Lily fell asleep in a plush guest room, her breathing steady, and Ethan joined Sophia on the balcony. The city skyline a glittering reminder of the world they were challenging. She handed him a coffee, her voice low. Tomorrow, I'll present the audit to the board, but they'll fight Dirty Klein's bin at this longer than I have. Ethan nodded, his own resolve mirrored in her determination, and he shared a piece of his past he'd buried, how his refusal to falsify data at Morgan Stanley had cost him his career, his wife's final months spent in a haze of debt and despair. Yet he'd do it again for Lily, for the chance to show her integrity wasn't just a word. Sophia listened, her silence a bridge between their worlds, and as the night deepened, Ethan felt a shift, not just all eyes, but two people bound by a shared reckoning, standing on the edge of a fight that could redefine them both. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sleek lobby of Reynolds Enterprises, where Ethan Hayes adjusted the cuffs of a borrowed suit, its crisp fabric a jarring contrast to his usual maintenance uniform. As he stepped into the elevator, his heart pounding, with the weight of the emergency shareholder meeting about to unfold. Sophia Reynolds had insisted he attend, not as a janitor, but as a witness to the truth they'd uncovered together. And though his presence might inflame the board, Ethan felt a quiet resolve, fueled by Lily's trusting smile that morning as she hugged him goodbye. Safe with Mrs. Carter, the boardroom was a battlefield of polished wood and glass, filled with investors in tailored suits, their murmurs a low hum of anticipation, and Ethan slipped into a back row, his borrowed tie tied against his throat. The employee roster he'd carried for days now a silent talisman in his pocket. Michael Grant stood at a projector, his slick confidence unshaken as he presented slides touting the Innovatech merger's unprecedented synergies, his voice smooth, but his eyes darting to Sophia, who sat at the head of the table, her posture rigid. Board Chairman Robert Klein followed, his tone grave as he addressed regrettable breaches of confidentiality, his gaze landing on Ethan with a sneer, painting him as a disgruntled former analyst stirring trouble. The press leak about his Morgan Stanley firing now a weapon to discredit him. Ethan's jaw clenched, the sting of his past failure sharp, but he held his ground, his eyes meeting Sophia's, who gave a subtle nod, her calm a beacon in the room's rising tension. As Michael concluded, Sophia patiently waiting for Sophia, she stood, carrying only a single sheet of paper, her resignation letter, and walked to the podium, the room falling silent. Every eye on the young CEO who'd built an empire but now stood on the edge of losing it. For 7 years, I've poured my life into this company, she began, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs like a blade, and Ethan saw the faintest tremor in her hands, a crack in her iron facade. She laid out the audit's findings with surgical precision Innovatech's overvalued assets, falsified R&D reports, and millions in kickbacks funneled to Michael Grant and Robert Klein, disguised as consulting fees. The room erupted in gasps, shareholders shifting uncomfortably, but Sophia pressed on, her voice rising with conviction. This merger's promised growth is a lie, built on gutting 4,800 jobs and stripping assets, not innovation. She held up the employee roster Ethan had given her, reading names aloud: Maria Alvarez, single mother of 2; David Chun, cancer survivor; Aisha Patel, expecting her first child, each name a hammer against the board's cold calculations, and Ethan felt a swell of pride, her courage echoing his own desperate stand days ago. Michael's face reddened, his polished veneer cracking as he interrupted, accusing Sophia of falling for a disgruntled employee's vendetta, but she silenced him with a look. Producing the independent audit's report, its numbers irrefutable, exposing a 40% valuation fraud and a trail of offshore accounts. Robert Klein stood, his voice booming with authority, demanding Sophia prioritize shareholder value. But she placed her resignation letter on the podium. "If this deal proceeds, it will be without me. I won't build success on the ruins of people's lives." The room exploded in chaos, investors shouting, board members scrambling, and Ethan watched Sophia step back, her shoulders straight but her eyes haunted, the weight of her father's legacy slipping away. Hours of heated debate followed, closed door. Negotiations spilling into the afternoon, and Ethan sat in silence, his presence a quiet defiance, knowing his life as a maintenance worker was over, his future uncertain. The outcome crystallized by dusk. The merger was dead, killed by Sophia's evidence and her refusal to bend. But the board voted to remove her as CEO, offering her a ceremonial board seat to soften the blow. Her substantial shares ensuring some influence, but no control. Ethan faced no charges, thanks to Ellison's legal maneuvering. But his job was gone, a casualty of the corporate war. And as he and Sophia left the building together, the evening air cool against their skin, they shared a moment of raw vulnerability. Sophia's laugh broke the silence, a sound of release rather than joy, and she turned to him, her green eyes bright. "I thought losing this would destroy me, but I feel free, like I can finally breathe." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of shedding a life defined by others' expectations, his own heart lighter despite the uncertainty, the memory of Lily's drawing, a family of Faye anchoring him. They stood outside the glass tower, no longer a janitor and a CEO, but two people unmoored, their paths now intertwined by a shared fight for something greater than themselves. Sophia's hand brushed his, a fleeting touch, and she said, "We're not done yet. There's work to do. For those 4,800 people," her voice firm, a spark of purpose igniting between them. Ethan felt the stirrings of hope, not just for Lily, but for a world where integrity could win, even at a cost. And as they walked into the Boston twilight, the city's lights a backdrop to their new beginning, he knew this was only the start of a journey neither had expected. 3 weeks after the collapse of the Innovatech merger, Ethan Hayes knelt in the community garden behind his weathered Boston apartment building, his hands sinking into cool soil as he showed Lily how to plant marigold seeds, her laughter a bright counterpoint to the city's hum, her asthma steady under a new treatment plan funded by a hospital charity Sophia had quietly arranged. The air carried the crisp edge of early summer, and Ethan's heart felt lighter than it had in years, unburdened by the corporate machine that had once defined him. Though the loss of his job left their future uncertain, a tightrope he walked, with cautious hope. Sophia Reynolds, no longer the untouchable CEO, but a woman finding her footing, had become a daily presence, her calls and visits weaving into their lives like a thread they hadn't known was missing. Together, they'd launched Horizon Partners, a small consulting firm focused on ethical business practices. Their first project, a bold plan to save a struggling Innovatech division by restructuring it into an employee-owned cooperative, preserving 300 jobs that would have vanished in the merger's fallout. Ethan's financial acumen, sharpened by years of hardship, meshed seamlessly with Sophia's industry connections and vision, their late-night planning sessions over takeout and spreadsheets in her penthouse, now softened with Lily's drawings, pinned to the fridge and a growing collection of plants, feeling less like work and more like a shared mission. Lily, thriving in a new school with a scholarship Sophia's lawyer, David Ellison, had secured, ran to them now, her braid bouncing as she held up a marigold seedling, her smile wide despite the soil smudged on her cheek. "This one's for you, Sophia," she said, handing over the tiny pod, and Sophia's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through as she knelt to accept it, her designer jeans dusting with earth. A far cry from the boardroom warrior Ethan had first confronted. Their partnership had evolved into something deeper, unspoken, but palpable in the quiet moments like when Sophia read to Lily during a rainy afternoon, or when Ethan caught her staring out her penthouse windows, no longer at a city she meant to conquer, but at a world she wanted to mend. That evening, over a dinner of homemade tacos in Sophia's now cozy penthouse, she shared the news. Their funding for the Innovatech Cooperative had been approved. A $2 million grant from a sustainability foundation she'd persuaded, her voice vibrant with pride as she calculated the impact. 300 families secure, a model for ethical business that could ripple outward. Ethan smiled, watching Lily sketch at the coffee table, her latest drawing a vibrant garden with 3 figures holding hands, and said, "That's a start, but we're just getting going." Sophia nodded, her gaze lingering on him, and asked, "Are you two still coming to the park tomorrow?" "I found a spot for a picnic," Lily piped up. "I'm bringing my kite." And Ethan laughed, the ease of the moment a stark contrast to the tense boardroom days, their lives now intertwined in ways he hadn't dared imagine. Reflecting on the path from that fateful confrontation, Ethan saw how their courages to speak, hers to listen, had rewritten their stories, not as a janitor and CEO, but as partners building something honest. Sophia, too, had changed. Her penthouse no longer a sterile showcase, but a home with Lily's toys scattered on the rug. Her days filled with purpose beyond stock prices. They developed routines, Saturday walks in Boston Common, late-night talks about their next venture. Lily's bedtime stories a shared ritual, and though they hadn't named the bond growing between them, it felt like family, unconventional, but real. On a warm June evening, they strolled through Millennium Park after a client meeting, Lily darting ahead to chase her kite's shadow, her laughter echoing as the golden light bathed the grass. Sophia and Ethan lagged behind, their steps slow, and he asked, "Do you ever miss it? The corner office, the power?" She watched Lily's kite soar, her hand brushing his, and said, "I miss the idea of it. What I thought it meant, but this, building something that doesn't hurt people, that's worth more." Her honesty struck him, mirroring his own journey from Wall Street's glitter to this grounded life, where Lily's health and their shared purpose outweighed any title. They paused by a fountain, the water sparkle catching Lily's delighted squeal, and Sophia's fingers laced through his, a quiet promise of what they were becoming. "I didn't lose what mattered," she added, her voice soft. "I just found what does." Ethan squeezed her hand, his heart full, seeing in her the same fire that had driven him to stand up in that boardroom, now channeled into a future they were shaping together. As Lily ran back, her kite trailing behind, she grabbed Sophia's free hand, pulling them toward the open field. And Ethan felt the weight of his past, his wife's loss, his career's collapses, replaced by a new rhythm of hope and connection. Their venture, Horizon Partners, was gaining traction, with 2 more companies seeking their guidance on sustainable practices, and Ethan's expertise, once buried under shame, now shown, tempered by the perspective of his struggles. Sophia, too, had found a calling, her talent for restructuring now saving jobs rather than cutting them. Her nights no longer sleepless with corporate guilt, but warm with plans and laughter. The 3 of them sat on a blanket as dusk settled, Lily recounting her kite's near escape, and Sophia leaned against Ethan, her shoulder warm against his, a silent acknowledgement of the life they were building, not perfect, but honest, rooted in the courage to choose what was right. As the stars emerged, Ethan looked at Lily, her eyes bright with dreams, and Sophia, her smile unguarded, and knew that this family, purpose, second chances was the deal worth making, written not on paper but in their hearts, a testament to the power of standing up and finding each other in the aftermath.